Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news, so if you haven't had time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. Stay tuned for our weekly review where we'll give you the scoop on the biggest stories that you may have missed in the last 7 days, right from Tel Aviv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us. War with Gaza has seemingly never been closer over the past 4 years than it seems to be right now, following an early morning rocket attack from Gaza. Palestinian terrorists fired 2 rockets, one which fell into the Mediterranean off of the central Israeli coast, and another that landed just outside of a Beersheba home. Thankfully, though, despite heavy damage caused to the building, no major injuries were reported.
בשעה 3:45 הגענו מיד למקום. אני והצוות שלי ועוד צוותים נוספים של בילוש הגיעו ראשונים לזירה. כמו שאתם רואים, יש פה הרס גדול. הבנו שיש לכודים בתוך הבית. נכנסנו לתוך הבית. זיהינו שם 3 ילדים ואמא מבוהלים, מפוחדים. כל הבית הרס עליהם. עזרנו להם לצאת בחוץ. זימנו כוחות נוספים, מקצועיים, אם זה חבלה, אמבולנסים.
יצאנו החוצה, התחלתי להסתכל, לחפש מאיפה זה, והתחלתי לכיוון החנייה, ואז ראינו את ההרס, ראיתי את ההרס אצל השכנה. ממש, מאוד מפחיד, מאוד. אתה מזדהה עם זה רגשית, אתה מבין את הסיטואציה ואת המצב שאתה רואה, ואני אומר, הדבר הראשון שאמרתי, זה נס. תודה לאל שניצלו פה חיים, זה לא משנה, בבית שלי, בבית של אחר, אבל ניצלו פה חיים, אבל זה נס, באמת נס, וזה הדבר שאנחנו לא יכולים להשלים איתו, הנושא הזה של הביטחון והשקט שאנחנו חייבים אותו, כי אתה רואה את הסיטואציה, אתה מבין שזה בלתי נסבל, מציאות כזאת. אנחנו תמיד שומעים בחדשות ורואים, אבל כשאתה רואה את זה קרוב, אתה מרגיש את התחושות אחרת לגמרי.
As per policy, after the attack, Israeli jets responded with airstrikes against terror targets in the Gaza Strip, with reports showing at least 20 targets being hit. 1 Palestinian was reportedly killed and multiple others were wounded. Prime Minister Netanyahu also held emergency meetings regarding appropriate responses to the attack, and Beersheba schools were canceled for the day. Then, just hours later, after the IAF strikes in Gaza began, another group of Palestinians attempted to launch a rocket into Israel from the northern Gaza Strip. Sirens were triggered, and the Israeli Air Force fired at the terrorists before they could mount their attack. Another Palestinian reportedly was killed. Even though Israel holds Hamas responsible for any Gaza attack on Israeli sovereignty, however, just last night, a senior Hamas official reportedly said that he believes both Israel and Hamas are eager to avoid another war. And in an odd change of behavior, both the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror organizations have released a joint statement condemning the attack as an attempt to derail Egyptian peace mediation. Hamas's Izz ad-Din Qassam brigades, the military wing of the group, published the statement on its website this morning, reading, quote, "The resistance wings and the Joint Command Center salute Egyptian efforts to achieve our people's demands and reject all irresponsible attempts that seek to distort and destroy the Egyptian efforts, including the firing of rockets last night." Quote, some Israeli officials, like Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz, seem to believe Hamas too. Speaking to Israeli radio, Steinitz, who is a member of the Security Cabinet, said, quote, "We must aggressively respond with force to the rocket strikes in Beersheba, but there is a difference between that and being drawn into a full campaign in Gaza. This whole flare-up was caused by Abbas, and we should not let him draw us in. If we go to war in the Strip, we will call it Abbas's war because he is the architect," end quote. Such a scenario, if true, would make sense too, as Abbas has been aggressively seeking to find ways of controlling Hamas and the Strip and bringing them back into the fold. All unity efforts have failed, however, and Abbas has now resorted to threatening to pull further funding from Gaza if Hamas continues to negotiate without the Palestinian Authority. Still, this comes just after Defense Minister Lieberman has been pushing for stronger actions against the Strip. He called on his fellow security cabinet ministers to approve his plan for a large-scale attack against Gaza, explaining that a, quote, "serious blow to the coastal enclave could result in at least a 4 to 5 year quiet along the border." And residents in Israel's south seem to be starting to feel the same.
שתהיה הבוקר נוראה מאוד. פשוט עברנו לילה מאוד קשה. מאוד קשה. זה בלתי אפשרי, אי אפשר להאמין. זה כבר פעם שנייה שאני חווה את זה קרוב לבית שלי. כמה אפשר? אני לא מבינה, למה לא עושים לזה סוף? שיעשו סוף, זהו, מספיק. כן, לא, כן, לא. פעם אחת להיכנס בהם וזהו זה. כמה אפשר לסבול?
But whoever the culprit, Israeli leadership is clearly under immense pressure to respond. This was the second rocket fired at Beersheba since the 2014 Gaza war, with the last one getting stuck in a field just north of the city in August. Furthermore, while most previous attacks were with mortars and Qassam, this morning's rocket was a longer-range Grad rocket. Time will tell who Israel will hold responsible and how. The 19-year-old Palestinian terrorist who carried out a stabbing terror attack in the West Bank on Thursday has now been arrested. According to the IDF, an army reservist and an Israeli civilian were wounded on Thursday outside an IDF base in the West Bank when the attacker ran at soldiers with a knife. The terrorist stabbed a 32-year-old reservist in the face and upper body, and a 26-year-old civilian woman was wounded in the leg by shrapnel caused by friendly fire. Both victims were taken into the hospital in stable condition. Then on Friday, 7 Palestinians were killed along the Gaza border, 1 at point-blank range, after a group of Gaza rioters blew a hole in the security barrier and infiltrated Israeli territory. After the Palestinian explosive detonated, roughly 20 infiltrators ran through the hole under the cover of smoke towards IDF positions. Soldiers fired warning shots, prompting most of the infiltrators to turn back, but some remained, continuing towards soldiers who fired upon them. The one killed at point-blank range had brandished a knife and entered close range to the soldiers stationed there. Roughly 250 other Palestinians were also injured during this weekend's March of Return protests. The Hamas-led demonstrations began in March, demanding the Palestinian right of return and an easing of the blockade around the Strip, including sanctions from the Palestinian Authority. In fact, Hamas is now again urging Palestinian Authority President Abbas to lift the sanctions his government has enacted on the Strip. In efforts to ameliorate the humanitarian crisis developing in Gaza, Egypt and Israel had even begun facilitating Qatari fuel shipments for use in Gaza hospitals and small businesses. But after these latest flare-ups, Defense Minister Lieberman has announced the halting of shipments into the Strip once again, saying, quote, Israel will not tolerate a situation in which fuel tankers are allowed to enter Gaza on the one hand, while terrorism and violence are used against IDF soldiers and Israeli citizens on the other, end quote. He continued that as long as the violence in Gaza doesn't stop completely, including the use of incendiary balloons and kites and the burning of tires, etc., fuel shipments to Gaza will not resume. In other news, United States Ambassador to Israel David Friedman met yesterday with a group of both Palestinian and Israeli business leaders to discuss economic cooperations that could operate outside the purview of politics. The meeting was a closed-door event in the city of Ariel in the West Bank, and it was put together by the Judea and Samaria Chamber of Commerce and Industry. During the meeting, Ambassador Friedman reportedly pushed for a future of peaceful coexistence based on civilian-led economic interests, with one NGO founding attendee telling the Times of Israel that Friedman even, quote, promised to speak to Israeli officials if we face any obstacles in carrying out our projects, end quote. Tweeting later, Friedman said that the Palestinian and Israeli business leaders he met with are, quote, ready, willing, and able to advance joint opportunity and peaceful coexistence. People want peace, and we are ready to help. Is the Palestinian leadership listening? End quote. But not everyone is as enthused. The Palestinian Authority has long been out of contact with Washington following the United States' embassy move to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, as well as massive financial aid cuts to Palestinian organizations and the closure of the PA offices in D.C., cuts that Friedman stood behind as part of the greater good. Further, other critics like J Street argue that this is just another effort to support the Israeli settlement enterprise. J Street's Vice President of Government Affairs, Dylan Williams, said that, quote, by making an official public appearance at an event in an Israeli West Bank settlement, Ambassador Friedman once again crossed a major long-standing red line of bipartisan U.S. policy, and that the Trump administration continues to send a clear message of support for the settlement movement and the agenda of the Israeli right, end quote. But whether Friedman supports the settlements or not, there's no evidence to support that statement this time around. In fact, originally, Friedman and his team were to hold the meeting in Hebron, where most of the Palestinian business heads attending the meeting are from. But a security detail moved the meeting last minute to Ariel for undisclosed security reasons. That aside, the meeting did reportedly go very well, with one American embassy official saying that Friedman was really encouraged by the enthusiasm and commitment to working together. So maybe, just maybe, his seemingly roundabout apolitical plan might just work. IAF jets opened fire on a group of Palestinians in the northern Gaza Strip this morning as the cell was launching incendiary balloons into Israel. No injuries from the strike were reported, but the incident comes after a recent rise in flaming kite attacks. The incendiary kites and balloons were coming into Israel on a near daily basis for months, but recently frequency has been in a relative lull, that is until this week. Riots and protests along the Gaza border haven't been much different, however, as terrorists continue to attack the Israeli border and the IDF soldiers stationed along it. Yesterday, the Gaza Health Ministry reported 32 Palestinians wounded by Israeli fire during the mass protests along the beach. Gaza rioters threw flaming tires over the security barrier, and boats with Palestinian flags approached the blockade. Just hours earlier, 2 terrorists in the southern Gaza Strip planted an explosive near the border fence. The explosion did cause damage to the barrier, but thankfully no IDF soldiers were hurt. The Israeli Air Force responded by firing on Hamas positions. Israel regularly responds in this fashion, either with riot dispersal methods or with live return fire, depending on the situation on the ground. Monday in the Knesset, Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated that Israel will do, quote, everything to prevent unnecessary wars, end quote, but will also not hesitate if need be. Defense Minister Lieberman also threatened that Hamas would need to heed Israel's warnings if it didn't want to see another war in the Strip.
אנחנו חייבים להנחית מכה קשה על חמאס, וזאת הדרך היחידה להחזיר את המצב לקדמותו ולהוריד את הרף האלימות לאפס או כמעט לאפס, או לרמה של 29 במרץ.
The defense minister already halted fuel shipments last weekend in response to continued violence. Hamas, however, has responded by calling Israel's bluff, saying the Palestinians aren't intimidated by Israel's, quote, empty threats.
Meanwhile, looking to the north, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said on Monday at the start of the Knesset's winter session that Israel is continuing to act against Iranian advancement in Syria while remaining in consistent contact with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Netanyahu said that his relationship with Putin is mutual and very important, as it allows him to deal with the challenges in the region. But he went on to say that despite how important his friendship with Russia is, quote, the most important of all is the alliance we've established with our greatest friend, the United States. Not only is the Trump administration committed to support us when it comes to security, the American president has also elevated the United States' support for Israel at the United Nations to a whole new level. We are in the eye of the storm with the turbulent Middle East around us, but I will not let this storm shake us, end quote. In line with those comments, a secret Israeli and American military delegation was reportedly sent to the Ukraine to test out the Russian-made S-300 missile defense system, the very same system that Russia recently delivered to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Neither Israel nor the United States have responded for comment about this delegation, but reports say that the Ukrainian army educated their guests on the S-300's capabilities and helped run various test scenarios. This isn't the first time Israeli air forces allegedly trained against the S-300 either, with some reports dating back to joint exercises in Greece as far back as 2007. And now Israel's fleet of F-35s are back in full service too, just in time for scheduled Air Force drills yesterday and today across the country. All signs clearly seem to point to Netanyahu sticking to his guns in defending Israel's continued, quote, legitimate activity in Syria against Iran and its proxies, end quote.
The IDF has ordered the demolition of the family home of Ashraf Na'alawa, the Balkan Industrial Zone terrorist who murdered Kim Levengron Yechezkel and Ziv Hajbi in a shooting attack last week. The IDF delivered the decision to Na'alawa's parents this morning, and security forces are now preparing to decimate his house. The Na'alawa family has 3 days to appeal the order.
And the last home demolition Israel conducted was of the home of Khalil Jabarin, the Palestinian terrorist who stabbed to death American-Israeli Ari Fold. Israel says the practice of demolishing terrorists' homes is considered an effective means of discouraging future attacks, though it has been criticized by human rights groups as a form of collective punishment. Meanwhile, the manhunt for Na'alawa continues into its 8th day and involves multiple security forces. The Border Police's Counter-Terrorism Special Unit Yamam, the Elite Duvdevan Unit, the Lotar Counterterrorism Unit, and the IDF Oketz Unit, as well as Shin Bet Forces, Central Command, and West Bank Brigade soldiers are all participating in the manhunt. Na'alawa is believed to be armed and preparing to engage soldiers when finally found, as security officials obtained an alleged suicide note prior to last week's attack. The IDF and Shin Bet have also arrested and interrogated several other Palestinian suspects that they believe aided Na'alawa in either his attack or escape. Arrests included Na'alawa's sister and brother, but charges against them have not yet been made public. Na'alawa arrived to his workplace in the Balkan Industrial Zone last Sunday morning and entered the offices of the Alon Group factory armed with an illegal submachine gun. He then shot dead his 2 victims and injured another before making his escape.
In an update from last week, it seems that University of Florida student Lara Al-Qasem lost her appeal with the Israeli courts on Friday and will be deported back to the United States. The courts have decided officially that the previous ruling to deport Al-Qasem 2 weeks ago was justified. The court made the ruling based on her past activities, not on her current stance on Israel. Al-Qassam was previously the head of her university's chapter of the pro-BDS anti-Israel group SJP, or Students for Justice in Palestine, which supports BDS activity against Israel. Al-Qassam fought the courts from the beginning, though, filing 2 appeals to remain in the country. But the Tel Aviv District Court rejected the latest appeal on Friday, October 11th. Al-Qassam was supported by the opposition's Meretz party chairperson Tamar Zandberg and MK Mossi Raz, as well as members of the BDS movement around the world, and in addition, even the Hebrew University president backed Al-Qassam against the Israeli legal system, stating that this ruling actually harms anti-BDS efforts around the world. But government officials are steadfast in their decision.
We're not looking to decide on prevention of entry based on opinions, based on somebody who supports, somebody who called one, somebody who signed a petition. We're looking at actions. We have clear criteria, and we believe that Ms. Al-Qassam meets those criteria based on her actions and on the actions of the organization of which she was a senior leader over several years.
Speaking with Kan News, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan then went further, blaming the Israeli left as well as Hebrew University for the fallout in this case. He stated, quote, "The left began an international campaign against their own country, trying to bring someone into the country who led a chapter of one of the most anti-Semitic boycott organizations," referring to SJP, "in all of America," end quote. And that, quote, "The Hebrew University acted horribly in my eyes. Not only did it support an anti-Israel student, but it joined the legal processes against the state," end quote. Only time will tell how the country will look back on this incident, but as of now, it seems the architects of the BDS ban law still believe the damage done to Israel's international public image is worth it. Moving on, Israeli envoy to the United Nations Dani Danon took time this weekend to blast NGO B'Tselem and their leader Chagai Elad just prior to Elad's scheduled address at the United Nations Security Council.
B'Tselem is an Israeli NGO that Danon says, quote, has proved in the past that it cooperates with Israel's enemies and is doing it this time with a nation that has called IDF soldiers murderers. This is not only shameful for the organization, but a crossing of red lines by foreign countries with an anti-Israel agenda, end quote. Now, this isn't the first time that B'Tselem has presented to the UN, but as Danon also noted, this is the first time that they've been invited to a, quote, official and influential session of the Security Council, end quote. Elad was invited for this Thursday by Bolivia, which currently presides over the Security Council. In 2016, B'Tselem's Elad also spoke to the UN, asking the body to denounce Israel's daily bureaucratic violence, and a year later he helped mark, quote, 50 years of occupation, end quote. This year, Elad will be addressing a periodic session on the state of the Middle East conflict on behalf of Israeli civil society. Danon, in response, has vowed to expose Elad's, quote, lies and incitement, end quote. Meanwhile, the Israeli government today is set to approve the new 22 million shekel housing expansion set for the West Bank city of Hebron. The plan is to develop a 31-unit housing complex in the Chezkiyahu neighborhood, and this would mark the first expansion to the Jewish section of Hebron in 16 years.
According to a recent announcement by Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison, the newly elected leader is, quote, open to moving the Australian embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. As anticipated, however, while the move would strengthen Israel's position on Jerusalem internationally, the prospect of the move has already also sparked intense debate.
First, Morrison is an evangelical Christian, raising fears that his decision was made on the basis of faith. The Australian premier denied the accusation, though, continuing that he's in support of a two-state solution, but that the topic of Jerusalem must not be taboo.
Now, the first thing I want to stress very strongly is the government's commitment to a two-state solution in the Middle East remains, has always been, and I believe always will be, Australia's policy in relation to the resolution of issues of Israel and Palestine. But at the same time, what we are simply doing is being open to that suggestion as a potential way forward. And I'm not going to close my mind off to things that can actually be done better and differently to aid the great cause of Australian foreign policy. The orthodoxy that has driven this debate, which says issues like considering the question of the capital are taboo, I think we have to challenge that. Australians are pretty upfront people, and I think we have to show the courage of our convictions in saying we're prepared to talk about other ways about achieving this goal, because frankly, the other ways have not been getting us there terribly successfully.
But the biggest criticism Morrison received was from the Palestinian representative to Australia, Izzat Saleh Abdul Hadi, who called Morrison's consideration of the move, quote, deeply disturbing. He said that it would only reinforce the United States' approach of taking the status of Jerusalem and the Palestinian refugees' right of return off the table. Morrison insisted the United States had nothing to do with the decision, however, yet did confirm speaking with Netanyahu, who tweeted his thanks to Morrison for considering the move. Ever since Trump declared the United States' intentions to move the embassy to Jerusalem last December, Israel has been trying to persuade other countries to follow suit. As of now, only Guatemala has made the announcement to move its embassy as well, so having Australia even consider the relocation too is seen as a huge step.
And now for this week's Top 5 with ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh.
So we've talked a bunch about Israeli designers, musicians, artists, chefs, hotels, restaurants. Wow, we've really covered a lot of topics now that I think about it. But what we haven't ever covered is the top 5 best music videos designed by Israelis. First up, and honestly most exciting for me, Beyonce and Jay-Z's music video for Ape Shit. Israeli producer Natan Schottenfels revealed in a nonchalant Facebook post that he produced the insanely viral video filmed at the Louvre, the first music video in years that the couple has dropped together, and it racked up over 18 million views in just the first 3 days. Beyonce and Jay-Z are seen posing in front of iconic art pieces like the Mona Lisa, and now the video casually has over 125 million views. So yeah, you could say he did a pretty good job. Second on the list is the music video for the Coldplay song Up and Up. Israeli directors Vanya Hyman and Gal Muja won international praise for this unique and unbelievable work for the hit single of the British band back in 2015. Considered one of the best music videos ever made, the video went viral real quick with over 3 million views on YouTube in just one day. This is just a little glimpse, people. Go check it out for yourselves and prepare to be amazed. Third up is Lady Gaga's 2016 Grammy tribute to David Bowie, which was only made possible with the help of Israeli-developed RealSense vision tech, built in Intel's Haifa offices. During the live performance, holography, robotics, and 3D vision tech were used to transform Lady Gaga's face into real-time reflecting phases of David Bowie's career. And not to mention, this was the first time these technologies were used in a live performance. Epic, to say the least. Fourth up is the Israeli singer, songwriter, musician, video director Oren Levi, who earned himself a Grammy nomination for his 2009 hit Her Morning Elegance, which has over 33 million views on YouTube. And then again for his video for Secondhand Lovers, in which he wrote the video script, directed, and played the main role in. Multi-talented is an understatement. Last but of course not least is yet another Coldplay music video for the song Hymn for the Weekend, where the band counted on Tel Aviv's Yaron Yashinsky studio for the visual design and animation. The video may have been filmed in India, but all of its design, animation, and visual elements were created right here in Israel by an 8-person team. In just 2 days, the video racked up 18 million views, and Yashinsky says the biggest achievement was that the video was made right here in Israel. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
All right, that's it for this week's weekly review. Remember to follow us on Facebook for more news at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.